Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today I just want to kind of go through some of these candidates that we might be considering for the general manager position. Of course, I think there's going to be a longer list of people that they talk to. There has to be because they have to have so many candidates. I believe, have to satisfy the Rooney Rule. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but it should be a similar amount of people as to what we went through for the head coaching search. But before that all gets announced, I do want to mention some names that have been thrown around, some guys that might make sense for this team, and just kind of give you the Cliff Notes version of just what I think of them and their history in the sport, what they've done, who they've worked with, all those sorts of things. And we'll kind of go generally in order here. Not exactly, I guess, in order, but probably who my top candidates are. Because the guy you see on the screen right now, which I guess his picture's not here, but his page is, Ray Agnew, would be my top candidate for this job. So we'll go ahead and start there. So Ray Agnew is someone who, I believe he is a little bit older, 57. He's been with a few teams. Well, he's been in an executive role, and you'll see here, it's interesting for how old he is as a candidate. He is not someone who's been in front offices for like 20 or 30 years, right? He started in 2017. So he's had 8 seasons in this kind of role in the NFL. And so you go back to his time with the Los Angeles Rams, he was a part of what ultimately was built up to be a Super Bowl roster in Los Angeles. He was someone who worked with Sean McVay, was around Liam Cohen as well there for 3 of those years, and ultimately was brought over to the Detroit Lions when they started their rebuild a few years back. And his role specifically, what you'll hear about him from people in the NFL is that with the Detroit Lions, Ray Agnew, 2 things. One, has been almost as important as Brad Holmes has been in building out this team. Some might debate that a little bit, but he's up there. The second thing is that Ray Agnew is going to be someone who is specialized in building out the trenches, right? So he's very much a big part of what Detroit has done with their offensive line, with their defensive line. When people talk about him around the NFL, that is an area where they say he is one of the very best in the league. You look at Jackson, you look at the things they need, right? Where's the weakness? And to me, I've said this for a while, I think it's the trenches, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. I think they need to be tough. I think they need to be physical. I don't think they've been that to what they should be. And you even heard at the end of this year, when Trevor Lawrence was interviewed, he said, we need to get back to that sort of stuff. So Ray Agnew, to me, is the top candidate because you get someone who is specialized in what you need, someone who is experienced with Liam Cohen, and is ultimately a qualified candidate for this job and should be a hot name in this process. And we have already heard some rumors that he is going to be a top name the Jaguars are considering. So there's my thoughts on Ray Agnew. Now, one thing I'll say before we move on, if you want to get to know Ray Agnew or anything about him, the best you can as a fan, of course, because we don't get to talk to these people most of the time, go check out on YouTube. He has a Senior Bowl video where they did a long interview with him. It's a good video. It'll tell you a lot about him. This is a guy, he loves scouting. He loves the details of the process. He loves the little things. He loves camp when all the rookies come in. Those are things that he lives for, specifically. Now, Ian Cunningham. This is probably, if I had to guess now, the candidate that the Jaguars end up playing. There's a lot of hype around it. If you believe what you hear from Yardline Yoda, which I do at this point, I think that the last week has proven a lot, that he does have sources, and you could question that. That's fine, because he is new around here. And then, of course, E. Dilla as well, right? Who you all know if you follow this channel. I believe the things that are said. And both of those guys have hinted that Ian Cunningham is the lead candidate right now. So that's where I'm getting that from. But Ian Cunningham, why he's talked about so much is because he's the number 2 in Chicago to Ryan Poles. And Ryan Poles, honestly, I'm kind of torn on him. Because I think that he's been great for being able to accumulate draft capital. To be able to win trades with other teams, aside from some blunders, right? He's had some really bad ones in there too. Chase Claypool, for example, not a good trade. Gave up a lot for Montez Sweat. Those are things that I think are worth mentioning. But ultimately, this is someone who has been talked about as one of the better GMs in the NFL because of that huge trade with the Panthers. I have questions more so about the players that they're acquiring. I don't know if I personally feel like it stands out compared to other teams. But honestly, it's not like the players all suck, right? It's not like they're missing on top picks, right? Caleb Williams obviously didn't have the year that Jaden Daniels had, but he should still be a really good quarterback. Rome Odunze should be a really good wide receiver. Probably wouldn't take him as high as they did, but everyone thought he should go that high anyway. And you look at like Darnell Wright, for example. Good player. He's been very good for them. So there's surely hits. I just don't know if it's standing out as far as how they scout and the players they acquire. Because the Chicago Bears, not exactly having success there so far. And then you get to Ian Cunningham. So that's who we're talking about here, right? That's a big reason why he's talked about is because he's worked with Ryan Poles. He's been that number 2. And maybe you get a candidate who's very similar to what Poles is. I think one thing that is enticing about Ian Cunningham is the history of who he has worked with. You got the Baltimore Ravens for ultimately what was 9 years. It's a good team to be a part of, a good team to learn from. And then working with the Philadelphia Eagles during a time where they were successful, right? Won a Super Bowl his first year there. He got to see that happen. And then recently, going to the Chicago Bears and being the assistant general manager. This guy's been part of 2 Super Bowl championships. I would assume one of these was Baltimore with Joe Flacco. The other, 2017, with the Philadelphia Eagles. So he's seen success. That's all good stuff. My question, I guess, would be if he is someone who is an excellent scout. And what is his role specifically with the Bears? What stands out about him? That's more so my concern. And there may be things that I don't know. But I think that's why Ian Cunningham gets talked about a lot is because he is the number 2 to Ryan Poles, and Ryan Poles has a very good reputation because of the trades he's been able to pull off and getting the Bears all this draft capital, getting the number 1 pick from the Panthers, and ultimately just seeming to rip him off, right? So that's where I stand on that. But, like I said, this is a Cliff Notes version. I'm sure there's a lot more you can say about some of these candidates. Now, Mike Greenberg, this was one that was interesting. The concern if he would come here is really just whether he would or not. Because obviously Tampa Bay is pissed. And Adam Schefter put it as he has never seen a team that has been this livid over a coaching situation basically in this century. He has never seen anything like it. Mike Greenberg is a part of it. Is he going to consider an interview in Jacksonville? He might not. He might tell this team to F off, for all we know. So that's the first thing. But Mike Greenberg is someone who's been a part of a successful front office. He's got 15 years. I guess this would probably have been for 2024 when they wrote this. So yeah, 15 years with the Buccaneers. He's been an assistant general manager for 2. A lot of what you're going to read here, and I pulled this up because for one, he doesn't have a wiki. 2, it's kind of the best place we could go. And it shows his history, right? And it shows what he's worked on. And so, what you're going to see is there is a ton of experience specifically with the financial aspects of a football team, with the salary cap management, how to do that properly. He was a huge part of Tampa Bay being able to run it back after winning a Super Bowl. So you can pause as I go down here, or you can just pull up the page yourself. It's Mike Greenberg's profile on the Buccaneers website. But you're going to see it here. 2021 offseason, Buccaneers being the first team in the Super Bowl era to return all 22 starters after winning the Super Bowl. I personally remember when they were trying to get all those players back and how crazy it was. And we couldn't believe they did it, right? Obviously, they didn't run it back and win the Super Bowl, but they still made a good playoff run. So he's been a part of a successful organization. He's had some great moments as far as negotiating contracts and being able to manage a salary cap for that team. That is his superpower. The concern that you obviously have, and the big questions that he should get when he's getting interviewed, is what have you done as a scout? Because there's a lot of talk about, okay, you're getting extensions for these players, you're working on contracts, you're managing the salary cap well. That's half the job, right? Because you also got to be able to get these players and know who to get, right? So that's the problem I would have personally. And I think you would want someone in here working alongside him if you made this move that is a scout at heart. And at that point, then, if this is your GM, that kind of limits who you can bring in because you can't have two GMs, right? If it's an assistant coming in, well, can't be an assistant for another team. It's got to be a lower role. So that's my concern with Mike Greenberg. I think this is someone who is phenomenal at half the job, and with the other half, I don't see the resume right now. And maybe the Jaguars interview him. Maybe he accepts. Maybe he proves that that resume is there. But there's not much you're going to find on it. At least I didn't when I was first looking into it. Now, two more candidates we'll talk about. This is probably one of the most fun candidates to me. This is Brandon Brown from the New York Giants. You're probably going to look at this and be like, the New York Giants, they suck. Why would we take a candidate from them? Go watch Hard Knocks, off-season edition from last year. If you want to learn anything about Brandon Brown, how this guy conducts himself, this is someone who is really young. He's 36 years old, but he has more experience as an executive than Ray Agnew, for example. 12 years, right? Just working his way up the food chain. You look at the teams he's been involved with. You got the Indianapolis Colts in the mid-2010s. But then he goes to Philadelphia, working over there, just like Ian Cunningham had. He's with them for 5 years, huge part of what they're doing, making his way up the ladder, and then comes in to the New York Giants as the assistant general manager. This is a guy who, for his age, and even not considering his age, but it's even more shocking because he's 36 years old, he is an incredibly professional person. He's someone I think I would have a lot of confidence in doing their job well. And I think that you find that if you watch how he conducts himself in Hard Knocks. You can even find a clip of him talking to Colorado players before this year, telling them what's expected, that they're watching every single thing they do. That they have to have this incredibly in-depth process to consider all these things when deciding who they want to bring to the New York Giants or for any other team doing it. Right? This is a guy who will inspire confidence. That is the big thing I want to stress. Now, of course, he is a really young candidate, and that might be a knock on him. But at the same time, this guy started these positions when he was 24. He was my age when he got into all this. And he is a professional. I think this is someone who can play in this role. I think he could be successful. And I love the scouting background. I love that is where he is best. Right? I want someone to come in who is good at that specific. Because I think as far as the cap, as far as the financial management, sure, there are struggles there. That is more so where I'd probably want assistance helping. And I don't think it's as hard to learn as getting the right players in the build. Just my personal opinion on it. So if we got Brandon Brown, if he was a candidate for this job, we pulled that off, I would be excited. Like, this is someone who I would love to bring into this team. Now, more things on him. I took this from the Chargers website. Giants assistant GM, stuff we know, right? A lot of different positions. We saw that here. All these different spots he's been. Constantly moving up the ladder. Every single year, it seems. This tells you a lot about how smart this guy is. He is doing all this with a lot of... he has worked his way all the way up the food chain in the NFL. Just has to be a GM at this point. That's the only thing left. And this guy's got a lot of on top of it. Part of the NFL's accelerator program. Yeah, no duh. Like, are we shocked about this stuff? But this is a candidate who is, I think, qualified for this kind of position when you really look in detail at what he's done and what he's proven. And I would absolutely have confidence that he could learn to be a very good general manager here and prove himself with the team. I know it was talked about. He almost got the Raiders job, right? John Spytek goes there. Probably would have been the top candidate for this job if this was handled normally, because you wouldn't have the fallout with Tampa Bay. And you'd be looking for the GM. Well, Spytek's still available. That's probably the best way this could have gone. But that's not the case. But hey, they didn't choose Brandon Brown because of it. So Brandon Brown is a candidate that is available. Now, last guy I'll talk about, Lance Newmark. So Newmark, I'm just going to be honest, guys. This was a name we did not hear until all of a sudden he was associated with Ben Johnson. Let's be real. Okay? He was brought up. Everyone started pushing for it because we wanted to get a guy who was aligned with Ben Johnson. We wanted to do what he wanted so that he would take this job. Get Trent Baalke out of there. Anything's better. And not that Lance Newmark isn't qualified. The guy's got a lot of experience in the NFL. The concern for me, you get 1 year, I guess 2 years, with the Chargers back before this century, and you spend all this time with the Detroit Lions, right? Tons of time. And look, the Detroit Lions were great at the end of 2022 and 2023, but all this time before, this was not a successful team. This was one of the laughing stocks in the NFL. That is where all your experience is coming from. That is a little bit of a concern to me. Now, obviously, he's being considered because of what he has done recently, because it doesn't really matter as much what you've done in the past. What matters is what you're going to do now. And what he's been doing now is really good. And that's probably why he was considered a top candidate to go with Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn. Now, shockingly, he didn't go with Aaron Glenn. I actually thought that was the case. I even reported that in one of our videos. Turns out it didn't happen. But he is available. So that's kind of my concern here. I think that he is a qualified candidate to be in a high front office position. But you have a long history of being in an organization that was not successful for 80 to 90% of the time you were. 90% of the time is closer. So have you learned, or are you part of what someone else has done? That would be my concern. But ultimately, I think he's worth an interview for sure. I think this is the guy you want to talk to. You want to figure out those things. Right? And you look at the history of what he's done. Once again, stuff I want to see. Working with scouting. Player personnel. Those are things I want you to be experienced in. So that's good. But yeah, it's just that question of what was going on during this time, and did you learn from it when we get to these final stints? So who knows? But these are the early candidates I would throw out. I'm sure there will be names I didn't talk about that end up being heavily in consideration for the Jaguars. And we'll probably record something about that. We'll just have to see when that is. Probably next week. I know tomorrow I'll be driving down to Tampa. So probably not going to have a ton of time to record anything just because I'll be with family. Don't really want to, not hang out with them. I haven't seen them for a long time. So unless something crazy happens, probably won't have anything for me until Monday once I'm in Mobile. I'll probably record some stuff that night as I'm trying to get ready for the Senior Bowl. So just keep that in mind. But with that all said, I think Jacksonville's in a great situation right now. I'll say that. What they've done in the last couple of days has drastically changed the direction of this franchise. It's drastically changed our expectations. I think they got in an incredible head coach candidate. And sure, once again, we're going to say this over and over. You don't know with new hires. You don't know with people who haven't been in the position. But you have to take a shot on people who have that upside to be a great head coach for a very long time. And Liam Cohen is that kind of candidate that you do it with. It's better than wasting 3 years with retreads that you know the problems with, you want to ignore, might work for a day or two, or even a year, but eventually you run into the same issues unless you know they've learned from it. And none of them, unfortunately, have learned in Jacksonville. So I commend this team for what they've done, and I'm really excited to see what happens now. But with that all said, I appreciate y'all watching. Shout out to our channel members. Premier Seer 904, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 5 Herring, and Brian Foster. Once again, just in regards to this, trying to get that all fixed, because I know people can't do memberships right now. Super chats are off. I'm just waiting for something to get in the mail that I can confirm my AdSense account, and then this will all be back. But nevertheless, appreciate you guys. Hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend. Once again, gonna say it again, go celebrate. And finally, go Jags.